For this is the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel after those days, saith the Lord. I will put my laws into their mind, and write them in their hearts. And I will be to them a God, and they shall be to me a people. And they shall not teach every man his neighbor, and every man his brother, saying, Know the Lord. For all shall know me, from the least to the greatest. For I will be merciful to their unrighteousness, and their sins, and their iniquities will I remember no more. In that he saith a new covenant, he hath made the first old. Now that which decayeth and waxeth old is ready to vanish away.
According to the Holy Scriptures, Yahweh Shai, the Son of the Most High, is set to bring immortality to the nation of Israel, the elect, via establishing the tabernacle of David, as we talk about the second coming of who the world ignorantly calls Jesus Christ. He is coming to take down this current world ruled by Esau, Edom, and establish a righteous kingdom, which is synonymous with the throne of David. That's scriptural, which is a government that's going to run this world in righteousness.
But now hath he obtained a more excellent ministry, by how much also he is the mediator of a better covenant, which was established upon better promises. For if that first covenant had been faultless, then should no place have been sought for the second. For finding fault with them, he saith, Behold, the days come, saith the Lord, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel, and with the house of Judah, not according to the covenant that I made with their fathers in the day when I took them by the hand to lead them out of the land of Egypt, because they continued not in my covenant, and I regarded them not, saith the Lord. For this is the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel after those days, saith the Lord. I will put my laws into their mind, and write them in their hearts, and I will be to them a God, and they shall be to me a people. And they shall not teach every man his neighbor, and every man his brother, saying, Know the Lord. For all shall know me, from the least to the greatest. For I will be merciful to their unrighteousness, and their sins, and their iniquities will I remember no more. In that he saith a new covenant, he hath made the first old. Now that which decayeth and waxeth old is ready to vanish away. For this.
All right, Shalom. First and foremost, I would like to give all praise, honor, and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rakakwadash, double honors unto the apostles and the elders of GMS, whom rule well, teach well, being great examples to his younger brothers. And peace and blessings, salutations to the hopeful lake out there pushing his word in truth and in sincerity across the four winds, in the name of Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai, pushing to get up out of here. Shalom to the hopeful lake, the believers, right, whom have came back to the obedience of the scriptures through faith in Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai. All right, and what I want to get into today, dealing with the first book, all right, of Samuel. Okay, 1 Samuel chapter 1. Lord will, we make a series out of Samuel. Let me share this out real quick. So lucky. I think it's shadow band. Let me get this shared out. But we're gonna go out through this book, 1 Samuel, and just keep going, because this is, as we go through a lot of history, in this channel, and one of the most important history, is our history, and when you start at 1 Samuel, it builds up, to the dynasty, the house of David, which, this ministry is all about, reviving that dynasty of the house of David back in the earth. Okay, and 1 Samuel, goes into the history that builds up, okay, to, all right, that dynasty, so this is, very vital history for us to understand, beginning with, 1 Samuel all the way, to the book of Kings and so forth and so on, all right. So let me share this out because I think they've been shadow banning a lot lately. So let me get this shared out and we'll get into it. Subscribe. Okay, so yeah, let's get into it. This is 1 Samuel chapter 1 verse 1. It says, now there was a certain man of Ramatha, all right, Zaphim of Mount Ephraim. Okay, now he was in the area of Ephraim. Okay, but he's Samuel's father is a Levite. Okay, and it says, and his name was Elkanah, the son of Jeroham, the son of Elihu, the son of Tuha, the son of Zuk, the son of Ephrathat. And he had two wives. The name of one was Hannah, and the name of the other Peninnah. And Peninnah had children, but Hannah, all right, but Hannah had no children, all right. And you go into this word Hannah in the Hebrew because she's going to be, the mother, okay, of Samuel, all right. But you go into her name in the Hebrew, which is Hannah, okay, which is, the feminine way of saying what? Grace, okay, as you have, John, all right, which is Yakanan in the Hebrew, okay, which is, grace of Yahweh, okay, but you just have, all right, Hannah, which means grace, in the English transliteration, it goes into Hannah, all right, so her name itself, means grace, all right, we're going to see the grace, that the Lord, bestows on Hannah, all right, and then grace translated to grace upon Israel, through her son, which will be Samuel, all right, and as you read verse 3, and this man went up out of the city yearly to worship and to sacrifice unto the Lord of hosts in Shiloh, and the two sons Eli, all right, and the two sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, the priests of the Lord, were there. Okay, so as Jake, had to go back to Jerusalem 3 times a year, to celebrate, okay, certain high holy days. Okay, and so wherever they was at, they had to check back in, to Jerusalem. You see that in the book of Acts, during the time of what they call Pentecost or the Feast of Weeks, okay, where you had Jake, okay, report back, to Jerusalem, okay, and it says, and when the time was that Elkanah, all right, and it says, and when the time was that Elkanah offered, he gave Peninnah his wife, and to all her sons and her daughters portions. But unto Hannah, all right, he gave a worthy portion, for he loved Hannah, but the Lord Yahweh shut up her womb, okay, and showing you that, life and death, okay, birth, all that goes through Yahweh Bashem Al-Shai. So her womb was shut up, okay, but her husband had another wife that was having children. So Hannah, became grieved, because back then, all right, it was a glory to a woman, to bear her husband's seed, especially, sons, okay? So she was grieved, she had a sorrowful spirit, okay? And it says, and her adversary also provoked her for to make her fret because the Lord had shut up her womb. So you had, her sister wife, Peninnah, pretty much meddling, okay, as Jake say, okay, or poking fun, all right, or agitating Hananiah because she was barren, while Peninnah, was fruitful, okay, and we've seen this story before, and one thing about it, this was the humility that Hananiah had to go through before, she would be honored, because as we know, all right, Hananiah will go on to have Samuel. All right, and we've seen this, scenario before. Okay, let's get this in Genesis 16. Genesis 16:1, it says, now Sarai, Abraham's wife, bare him no children, and she had an handmaid, an Egyptian, whose name was Hagar. And Sarai said unto Abram, behold, now the Lord have restrained me, all right, from bearing. I pray thee, go in unto my maid. It may be that I may obtain children by her. And Abram hearkened to the voice of Sarai. And Sarai, Abraham's wife, took Hagar, her maid, the Egyptian, after Abram had dwelt 10 years in the land of Canaan, and gave her to her husband Abram to be his wife. Now this is 10 years past the time that the Lord promised Abraham that he would have an heir. Okay, so 10 years had passed and there was no heir. Okay, and Sarah, all right, or Sarai at the time, which means princess. Okay, she understood that, you know, Abraham needed an heir. You know, he was getting older, all right, and that he needed, you know, an heir to carry on, you know, his inheritance and his legacy, because Abraham was a man of substance. Okay, and it says, verse 4 says, and he went in unto Hagar, and she conceived, and when she saw that she had conceived, her mistress was despised in her eyes. All right, so when she conceived Hagar, okay, which her mistress Sarai, which means that Sarai was Hagar's mistress, which was a feminine way of saying master. Okay, so when she got pregnant by Abraham, you know, she got full of herself. She got beside herself, and she began to treat Sarai with contempt. You know, she began to lose respect for Sarai. Okay, and not to obey. You know, she he got proud. Okay, and it says, and Sarai said unto Abram, my wrong be upon thee. I have given my maid into thy bosom, and when she conceived, I was despised in her eyes. The Lord judged between me and thee. But Abram said unto Sarai, behold, thy maid is in thy hand, do to her as it pleaseth thee. And when Sarai dealt hardly with her, she fled from her face. You know, so she went and took the complaint to Abraham about how, you know, Hagar was getting out of pocket. And Abraham, you know, said, like, look, that's your servant. You know, do whatever you please. All right. So Sarai at the time put that pressure on Hagar. You know, and it was the spirit of the Lord, because, you know, Hagar would have Ishmael, and Ishmael wouldn't be of the covenant. All right. Because guess what? Sarai, you know, she had to go through that humility, you know, you know, being despised by her servant. All right, but then what? Sarai would eventually, well, Sarah, okay, would eventually have who? Isaac. Okay, and that was her honor, that was her glory, and we still speak about, you know, Sarah until this day, you know, in a way of honor. Okay, but she had to go through the humility first. Okay, she had to be patient. Okay, and eventually she was blessed, you know, by bearing, you know, Isaac. You know, Isaac had Jacob, and you have the 12 sons. Okay, so you go here, happen another time. All right, and they just accounts of humility, you know, before honor, which we'll get that. So let's go here. Genesis 30. All right, so now it says, and when and when Rachel, Genesis 30:1, it says, and when Rachel saw that she bare Jacob no children, Rachel envied her sisters and said unto Jacob, give me children, or else I die. And Jacob's anger was kindled against Rachel, and he said, am I in the Most High stead? Who have withheld, all right, who have withheld from thee the fruit of the womb? So, you know, pretty much Rachel, you know, is you know, bickering about, you know, she wants a child, because Leah, you know, her older sister, you know, she had began to bear Jacob's sons, and Rachel didn't bear any. Okay, I think Rachel was like 2 sons up at this point, 2 or 3. All right, you read Genesis 29. Okay, so now Rachel, you know, is bickering, you know, at Jacob, you know, and Jacob, you know, is pissed, like, look, what can I do? You know, we just read in Samuel that the Lord closed the womb of Hannah, you know, so it was nothing that Elkanah, all right, could do. You know, it's just what it was. You see, so it all to the Lord, but the Lord was, you know, taking these particular women through humility, which we know Israel is likened to a woman, and we, you know, as a nation, had to be humble, you know, before we come into honor. But only the elect, you know, will have the patience, okay, to go through that humiliation, okay, and get that honor, okay. And it says, and she said, behold, my maid Bilhah, go into her, and she shall bear upon my knees, that I may have children by her. And she gave him Bilhah her handmaid to wife, and Jacob went unto her. So Rachel, she gave, Bilhah her handmaid to Jacob to bear seeds, to bear sons. Okay. And eventually Rachel will have who? Joseph. Okay. And Joseph pretty much became the hero, in that time amongst, okay, the sons of Jacob, okay, for what he did in Egypt. He pretty much, the Lord used Joseph to preserve, his family, his brothers, his nieces and his nephews and nieces, and, his family, his extended family was, preserved, through the Lord using, Joseph. Okay. And Joseph had to go through, humility before honor. All right. So I just wanted to get those accounts as we see what's happening with Hannah, okay, as she's barren, and then her husband's other wife, is pretty much, picking at her and, antagonizing her, okay, being the adversary to her, okay. But Hananiah is finna come into, honor. All right. I mean, Hannah is finna come into honor. All right. So that's a Proverbs that we get all the time. So let's get it. Then we get back to the book of Samuel. First Samuel. This is Proverbs 15:33. It says, the fear of the Lord is the instruction of wisdom, and before honor is humility. Okay. And before honor is humility, man. So that's a common theme we see in the scriptures, with our forefathers, even some of our foremothers, there's always, humility. All right. There's always, bringing to a lower state before honor. And the thing is, the patience and the obedience that we have in the lower state. Okay. Because even when you go here to the book of Sirach, okay, chapter 2, verse 1. Okay. It says, my son, if thou come to serve the Lord, prepare thy soul for temptation, which is trials. Okay. So we're seeing, Hannah go through her trial, of being, ridiculed, persecuted, for being barren. Okay. It says, set thy heart aright with thy mind, and constantly endure, and make no haste in time of trouble. Okay. So, it says, set thy heart aright, which is thy mind, and constantly endure, because the Lord, in this time puts us in situations to where we have to endure the circumstances, but we still have to have the right mind in these circumstances, because these circumstances get us to doubt, get us to be bitter, get us to be depressed. Okay. And we're learning and we're being conditioned, to have a strong mind to go through what we're about to go through, which is the straight gate, humiliation on a whole nother level. All right. And it says, cleave unto him. So as we're going to see, as Hannah goes through her humility, she cleaves to the Lord. Okay. Which that's what we are to do when we go through things, when things get shaky and unknown. We should cleave to Yahweh B'Shem Yahushua. Okay. It says, cleave unto him and depart not away, that thou mayest be increased at thy last end. See, at the back end, you see the glory, the honor, everything that we want is going to come on the back end. So right now it's just it's a test of endurance, man. Keeping the right mindset through the ups and downs, through the trials, through the setbacks, keeping the right mind towards Yahweh B'Shem Yahushua, being unmovable. The Lord is, teaching us to be unmovable in these times. Okay. And it says, whatsoever is brought upon thee, take cheerfully, and be patient when thou art changed to a lower state. Okay. So the scriptures push that patience and taking these things cheerfully, man. Because one thing about it, salvation is a journey, and there's ups and downs. You have low points, you have high points. Okay, you have uncertainties, you have, times where you're full of faith, times where, doubt creeps in. Okay. And well, one thing about it, we have to take these things cheerfully, knowing that Yahweh Bashim Al Shai is with us, for the victory, man. The Lord is with us for victory. You see, in all these situations, the Lord is that one constant. Yahweh Bashim Al Shai is that one constant through all these different trials, man. Okay? Verse 5, it says, for gold is tried in the fire, and acceptable men in the furnace of adversity, man. So before we're able, to be deemed acceptable, man, we have to, go through these trials, and keep the faith, man. Be patient, trust, you see, be unmovable. All right, cleave to the Lord, in these things. So let's go back to here, because we all been tried, and it's a daily trial. Every day is a trial to some degree. Some days big trial, some days, small trial, but it's a trial every day, And it says, and her adversary also provoked her sore, for to make her fret, because the Lord shut up her womb. And as my family reading NLT, it says, so Peninnah would taunt Hannah and make fun of her because the Lord had kept her from having children. Year after year, it was the same. Peninnah would taunt Hannah, all right, as they went to the tabernacle. Each time Hannah would be reduced to tears and would not even eat. Why are you crying, Hannah? Elkanah would ask. Why aren't you eating? Why be downhearted just because you have no children? You have me. Isn't that better than having 10 sons? Okay? Which shows you that, they paint this picture. Okay, it's just in the ancient world, the Israelite man was just, this character like Mr. Just no, feelings of, compassion, towards the wife, but it wasn't so, The Israelite men loved their wives. Now you had, situations, okay, you had certain circumstances, but that wasn't, just the norm. All right, men wasn't much more of an austere, posture, but it wasn't just this, this brick hard, unconsiderate, relationship between the Israelite man, and his women. All right, and it says, once after a sacrificial meal at Shiloh, Hannah got up and went to pray. Eli the priest was sitting at his customary place beside the tabernacle. All right, beside the entrance of the tabernacle. Now you read this in the KJV. It says, so Hannah rose up after they had eaten in Shiloh and after they had drunk. Now Eli the priest set up a seat by a post of the temple of the Lord. Now showing you the duty, of the priest, to be at the post, to have a post, at the entryway of the temple of the Lord. And, just a quick side note, when you go here to the book of Proverbs, which we have taken on the duty of priests, okay? When you go here to Proverbs 8 and 33, says, hear instruction and be wise and refuse it not. Blessed is a man that heareth me, watching daily at my gates, waiting at the post of my doors. Okay? So that was a job of the priest, to be at the post of the temple, to monitor and oversee what was coming in and what was coming out. Okay? He would post up, at the gates of the temple. And this is what we're doing now in the spirit, as, we know the believers are the temple, and we're posted at the gates. Like when we're on the internet, we're on the web, we're watching what's coming in and what's going out, false doctrines, get checked. That's why false doctrines get checked, off mindsets get checked, okay? Because the priest will be at the door overseeing what's coming in and what's coming out in the temple, which the temple is us now, okay? So the Lord has, set up priests, daily at the gates watching, So I just wanted to go into that, to show you that that concept comes from, the duty of the priest, So this is back in 1 Samuel, all right, 1 and 10. All right, it says, Hannah was in deep anguish, crying bitterly, and she prayed to the Lord Yahweh Bashim Al Shai. Now she's cleaving, to Yahweh Bashim Al Shai. And she made this vow, O Lord of heaven's army, if thou, all right, it says, if you will look upon my sorrow and answer my prayer and give me a son, then I will give him back to you. He will be yours for his entire lifetime, and as a sign that he has been dedicated to the Lord, his hair will be never cut, which goes to the Nazarene vow. And she was praying to the Lord Eli. All right. It said, as she was praying to the Lord, Eli watched her, seeing her lips moving, but hearing no sound. He thought, all right, she had been drinking. So Eli thought she was drunk. She was tripping. Verse 14, it says, must you come here drunk? And he demanded her, throw away your wine. So Eli come to her, fussing, like, get your drunk ass away from here, man. You come here drunk, you see? Verse 15, it says, oh, no, sir. She replied, I haven't been drinking wine or anything stronger, but I am very discouraged, and I was pouring out my heart to the Lord, Yahweh Bashim Shai. Don't think I am a wicked woman, for I have been praying out of great anguish and sorrow. In that case, Eli said, go in peace. May the power of Israel grant the request you have asked of him. Oh, thank you, sir, she exclaimed. Then she went back and began to eat again, and she was no longer sad, okay? Because it shows you that she had faith, because even before her prayer was answered, she was cheered up. It shows you that she had faith, So even before the Lord, would grant, her prayer, she had faith, man. Eli, pretty much, vouched, he pretty much put a spiritual vouch on their prayer. He asked, he said, may her prayer be, granted, and she just heard that, and that's all she needed to hear, and she was good. And it shows you that what she had, that faith, okay? And it shows you, when you read here, it says the entire family got up early the next morning and went to worship the Lord once more. Then they returned home to Ramah. When Elkanah slept with Hannah, the Lord remembered, her plea. And in due time, she gave birth to a son. She named him Samuel, for she said, I asked the Lord for him, okay? And when you go to, they show you that, the Lord, deals with the prayer, of the righteous. Hannah was in the right spirit, okay? She wasn't, concerned with a tick for tack with Peninnah. She clave to the Lord, and she went to the Lord with her petition, okay? So you go here to the book of 1 Peter chapter 3, okay, in verse 12. What does it say? It said, for the eyes of the Lord are over the righteous, and his ears are upon their prayers, but the face of the Lord is against them that do evil. Okay, so the prayers of Hannah, came to the throne of Yahweh Bashim Al Shai, okay, in the heavens, and they was granted in the earth. Okay, and that's the power, of prayer, and that's why it's good to have, be in good standings with Yahweh Bashim Al Shai, because as we can pray, for things as we need, the Lord grants those things, man. As we pray in righteousness. Okay? Hananiah, she didn't pray, okay, for harm to Peninnah, or, she didn't pray for, the script, to go whoop Peninnah. Like, nah, she prayed for, a son. And not only did she pray for a son, but she, said she would give that son, to the Lord, which Samuel also represents the first fruits, because you had the offering of the first fruits. You will give the first of your crops, the first of your offspring of your livestock, okay? And you will give the first, you would dedicate your firstborn son, to the Lord, okay? And you will redeem the son, all right? But Samuel also represents, the first fruits, okay? They're offering unto the Lord, okay? Which we'll get into that. But let's get this here, dealing with prayer, all right? Because you had the account in Tobit, you had Sarah, Okay, she was barren. All right, and you had Tobit. You know, he went blind. Okay, so they both prayed. All right, in Tobit the 3rd chapter. You know, they both. All right. So he said, then this Tobit 1:1. It says, then I being grieved did weep, and in my sorrow prayed, saying, O Lord, thou art just, and all thy works and all thy ways are mercy and truth, and thou judgest truly and just forever. Okay? So he's going into his prayer, and then Sarah, all right, because Sarah was she was being persecuted because the men, you know, that all the men that she was supposed to marry, they would die, you know, before they could deal with her in the bedchamber. You know, it was a demon, okay, an evil spirit that was putting men to death, you know, that were betrothed, all right, with Sarah. So the maids of her father's house, the women, began to persecute her, you know, began to ridicule and mock her. Okay? You see? So she went into prayer. All right. You can read that whole chapter, Tobit the 3rd chapter, but I want to get this point. So the prayers of them both were heard before the majesty of the great power. Okay. So the prayers of Tobit and the prayers of Sarah were heard. Okay. They came before the throne. And that's the powerful, you know, access to have, you know, is access to the throne of Yahweh Bashim Yahushai, which we have that access through Yahweh Shai. Okay? So that's a powerful thing to have. You know, that's why prayer, you know, fasting and praying, you know, is a heavy thing. Okay? It says, so the prayers of them both were heard before the majesty of the great power, and Raphael was sent to heal them both. That is to scale away the whiteness of Tobit's eyes, because he had went blind, and to give Sarah the daughter of Raguel for a wife to Tobias the son of Tobit, and to bind Asmodeus the evil spirit, because she belonged to Tobias by right of inheritance. The self same time came Tobit home and entered into his house, and Sarah the daughter of Raguel came down from her upper chamber. Okay, so the Lord would send Raphael, which is Rapaya Allah, you know, the healer of the Most High, okay, in the Hebrew, and he will come and heal the whole situation, you know, as we're going to see, you know, as we see with Sarah, with Hannah, okay, she conceives and she has Samuel. Now, when you go into, okay, this word Samuel, all right, let's go back. Let's go into this word Samuel, 1 Samuel, let's see, 1:20. All right, 1 Samuel 1:20. So you get this word Samuel in the Hebrew, all right, which is Shema Ha'ala, Shema Ha'ala. All right, now when you go here in the Strong definition, all right, it says heard of the Most High, okay, because her prayers were heard, okay, heard of the Most High. So the prayers of Hannah, okay, was heard, okay, and even when you go into it's the book of Luke chapter 2, verse 25. Okay, it says, and behold, there was a man in Jerusalem whose name was Simeon. Okay, and the same man was just and devout, waiting for the consolation of Israel, and the Holy Spirit was upon him. And you read this in the NLT, verse 25, 2 Luke 2:25. It says, at that time there was a man in Jerusalem named Simeon. He was a righteous and devout, and was eagerly waiting for the Messiah to come and rescue Israel. The Holy Spirit was upon him. Now you get this name here, Simeon, okay, which in the Greek,
26, Zumayon,
all right, which goes into what? A hearkening, you know, which means you're listening. When you're hearkening something, that means you're listening, okay? So you got that word, what? Hearkening, Okay, so Simeon, which that was one of the tribes, okay, which was one of the sons of Leah, okay, and he was waiting on what? The eagle awaiting Yahweh Shai, you know? And it says, and it was revealed unto him by the Holy Spirit that he should not see death before he had seen the Lord's anointed. And he came by, and he came by the Spirit into the temple. And when the parents brought in the child Yahushua to do for him after the custom of the law, then he took him up in his arms and blessed the Most High and said, Lord, now lettest thy servant depart in peace according to thy word, for my eyes have seen thy salvation, which thou hast prepared for the face of the people, a light to lighten the Gentiles, the Israelite foreigners, and to the glory of the people of Israel. You know, so once he seen Yahushua, he was good. He knew we good. He knew the nation was good. Once he seen Yahushua, he knew the nation was good. You know, and that's how the Lord allows certain children to be born, certain sons, you know, to be born. And it's like, okay, we good now. You know, even Noah, all right, had that effect. When you go to Genesis 5, when Noah was born, okay, all right, it says, and Lamech lived, this is Genesis 5 and 28. It says, and Lamech lived 182 years and begot a son. And he called his name Noah, all right, which is Nawak, who goes into comfort, saying, this same shall comfort us concerning our work and toil, all right, of our hands, because of the ground which the Lord have cursed. Okay, so Noah, you know, was a token of comfort, you know, to the sons of God at that time, those that was in the right way. Okay, just as, you know, Samuel was a token of the Lord's grace towards Hannah. Okay, and also his grace towards Israel, because through Samuel you'll get what? The anointing of who? King David. You know, as we're going to go on later on, you know, in these chapters. Okay, and then through King David, who do you get from King David? Yahweh Shai. Okay, which, you know, Simeon in the book of Luke, he seen Yahweh Shai and he seen that birth, and he was like, we good. So even then in Genesis, when Noah was born, they were like, bet we good, because through Noah, all right, the sons of God was preserved, you know, through Shem. Okay, so going back, okay, because even you go to Genesis 29, so let's get this real quick. Genesis 29 and 33. Okay, this one Leah. All right, it says, and she conceived again and bare a son, and said, because the Lord have heard that I was hated, he have thou given me this son also. And she called his name Simeon. Okay, and you go into Simeon, all right, which is in Hebrew Shemaiah 1. All right, Shemaiah 1 in the Hebrew, which means what? Heard. Okay, and you go into the root, all right, which is Shema, which is to hear, to listen, to obey, okay, to understand. You see? All right, Shema in the Hebrew, okay. So the birth of Simeon, you know, was the affliction of Leah, you know, being hurt. I say, which Israel is likening to what? A tender and delicate woman, you know. So the Simeon was a token that she was being hurt, okay. And then I think she, you know, she conceived and bore Levi, and then Judah. Oh yeah, so Leah, she was 4. She had 4 sons. Okay, yeah, she was up 4. You know, before Rachel, you know, started to give Jacob her handmaid. You know, so you know Leah wasn't favored, you know, by Jacob. You know, she was favored by the Lord. You see, and she had 4 sons. You know, before anybody had children. You know, Leah was 4 up, you know, because she was praying to the Lord. You go into that account, all right? It's heavy. But 1 Samuel 1 and Where we at? All right, 1 Samuel 1:20. It says, and in due time she gave birth to a son. She named him Samuel, for she said, I have asked the Lord for him. The next year, Elkanah and his family went up on their annual trip to offer the sacrifice to the Lord, but Hannah did not go. She told her husband, wait until the boy is weaned. Then I will take him to the tabernacle and leave him there with the Lord permanently. Whatever you think is best, Elkanah agreed. Stay here for now, and may the Lord help you keep your promise. So she stayed home and nursed the boy until he was weaned. When the child was weaned, Hannah took him to the tabernacle in Shiloh. They brought along, a 3-year-old bull for the sacrifice and a basket of flour of some wine. After sacrificing the bull, they brought the boy to Eli. He said, Sir, O Lord, do you remember me? Hannah asked, I am the woman who stood here several years ago praying to the Lord. I asked the Lord to give me this boy, and he has granted my request. Now I'm giving him to the Lord, Yahweh Bashim Al-Shai, and he will belong to the Lord his whole life, and they worship the Lord there. Okay? And this also goes back, you go into the law. Okay, so the Samuel is given over. He's weaned, he's getting of age, and once he gets, to a young boy, he's given over to the priest, he's dedicated, to the temple, you see, and that's heavy, and as we become, born again, we've been dedicated to the temple, okay, to the service of Yahweh Bashim Al-Shai, So let's go to what's that? I think that's in Numbers 18. Okay, I think Numbers 18 and 12. So this is the things that was given. The people will offer up to the Lord, and the Lord will give these things to his priests. All right. It says, Numbers 18 and 12 says, I also give you the harvest gifts brought by the people as an offering to the Lord, the best of the olive oil, new wine and grain, all the first crops of their land that the people present to the Lord belong to you. Any member of your family who is ceremonially clean may eat this food. Everything in Israel that is specially set apart for the Lord also belongs to you. The firstborn of every mother, whether human or animal, that is offered to the Lord will be yours, but you may always redeem, your firstborn sons and the firstborn of the ceremonially unclean animals, okay? And it just represents, the first fruits, will be brought to, Israel will bring their best, their choice, to the Lord, okay? And the elect, beginning with the 144,000, okay? The 144,000 of those first fruits, and as we was born, into this time, we belong to the Lord. Okay. This is the book of Revelation 14. All right. I started verse 1. It says, now look, and lo, a lamb stood on Mount Zion. All right, and this represents the government. Okay. It's King David when he conquered Jerusalem from the Hamites. Okay. He established Jerusalem as his capital. Okay, in which the government will function out of Jerusalem. Okay, so the Lamb, which is Yahweh Shai, stood on Mount Zion. That's the eternal government that the Lord is going to set up in the earth under Yahweh Shai. Okay, and it says, and with him 144,000 having his father's name, written in their foreheads. Okay, there's authority, okay, from the Father and the Son. Okay, and also that obedience to that authority. That understanding of that authority, okay, and their rank, man. Okay, it says, and I heard a voice from heaven as the voice of many waters and as the voice of great thunder, and I heard the voice of the harpers harping with their harps, and they sung as it were a new song before the throne and before the four beasts and elders, and no man could learn their song but the 144,000 which were redeemed from the earth. So the Lord has brought us back to himself from the earth. He took us from this world and redeemed us back to him. You know, if we're of those first fruits, you know, and we're singing this new song, okay, as we're, singing the names, you know, as part of the new song, singing prophecy, the rulership that's to come, that's part of the new song. Because this song wasn't being sung in the earth, man, but it has been refreshed. Because you go into new, it goes into refresh. But now this song has been refreshed in the earth, man. Victory over the heathen, the downfall of Esau, Edom, all this is part of the new song. Us being changed, the new bodies, immortal, being immortals, the eternal kingdom, the promises of our forefathers. See, this song has been revived in the earth, man. And those first fruits are singing these songs perfectly, man. Okay? This is verse 4. It said, "These are they which were not defiled with women, all right, for they are virgins." Speaking of, all right, doctrines, okay, and philosophies, as we've been born again, that we've, come into the truth, all right. We're not defiled with the doctrines of this world, okay. We're not fusing Christianity with the truth, or, Islam, or, Catholicism. Nah. We're sticking to this one way, all right. We're dedicated, we're faithful to this one doctrine. As a woman will be faithful to that one husband. Isaiah says that before, it said, "These are they which were not defiled with women, for they are virgins. They are they which follow the Lamb whithersoever he goeth. These were redeemed from among men, being the first fruits unto the Most High and unto the Lamb." Okay, so you get the first fruits. Okay, as we follow Yahushua, wherever the spirit of Yahushua, because you had, those men that follow Yahushua when he was physically here, but now his spirit is here. Now you have those first fruits following the spirit of Yahushua, whether it goeth, man, even unto persecution, as we know the devil is going to he's going to demonize the name of Yahushua. And we got to follow Yahushua through their persecution, man. Okay? And it says, so you go to the first fruits, which is the
Strong's G 536. Aparche.
Okay? Now you go to definition 3. It says, person superior in excellence to others of the same class. Okay? So the first fruits are those choice spirits, okay, that are separated for a particular purpose unto the Lord. Just as we see Samuel, he was separated for a particular purpose unto the Lord, to be a great judge in Israel, a great prophet and priest, in Israel. Okay, so those first fruits are set apart, all right, from the womb. Okay, that's why even with Jeremiah, what did he tell Jeremiah? Jeremiah 1, all right, and 4 said, "Then the word of the Lord came unto me, saying, Before I formed thee in the belly I knew thee, and before thou camest forth out of the womb, I sanctified thee and ordained thee a prophet unto the nations." Okay, so those first fruits, all right, they're superior amongst Israel, and they're born with a particular purpose, man, with a particular order, and there will come a point in their life to where they will be fully dedicated to the Lord. Because when we was in the world, there was when, we was being weaned, to get ready to be dedicated to the Lord. And Samuel had to be weaned to a certain point by his mother, and then he was dedicated, and that's the process we, went through in the spirit. So, so let's get this. We'll get this in Corinthians. We'll end it here. I think the point, let's say, 1 Corinthians 6 and 19, it says, "What, know ye not that your body is the temple of the Holy Spirit, all right, which is in you, which you have of the Most High, and you are not your own? For you are bought with a price. Therefore glorify the Most High in your body and in your spirit, which are the Most High's," man. Okay, so we belong to the Most High. If we're of, that those first fruit, You know, there's a certain level of dedication that the Lord expects of us above the rest of Israel. You know, because you hear about, you know, we being superior. Okay, well, that superior, being superior comes with a superior responsibility, man. A different dedication, man. Okay, so that's the point. All right. Lord willing, you know, you brothers, all right, and you sisters, all right, will edify till next time I say Shalom, Kwam Yashala, Abab, soon, Shalom.